you all for viewing into today's session. And I'm Pranav Khandewal from the Student Success Team. And today we have with us Mr. Puneet Agrawal from Microsoft, who will be taking the session for. Yeah. So over to you, Puneet.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Puneet. Am I audible, Pranav? Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Go on, Puneet.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Puneet. I run a AI engineering team here at Microsoft India in Hyderabad. So, in today's session, I would basically talk a bit about what's happening in artificial intelligence, why it is suddenly kind of booming up, and show you some interesting use cases of AI, and then also introduce in the end an AI challenge that we are running here at Microsoft. And I hope that you guys will participate in the same as well. Um, so the first question that I always ask myself is that what is artificial intelligence or AI, right? Many a times I feel that when I ask this question to the audience, I hear things like iRobo or Transformer, those kind of things, things which feel as if they're very far from us in the future, something that is not near and very very far in the future, kind of a thing. But I feel that that's not true. The artificial intelligence is kind of around us in many things that we do. For example, we all use search engines. Search engines is a classic case of artificial intelligence. Or we use different personal assistants like Siri or Google Now or Cortana, and they all kind of are in some sense artificial intelligence. So the key point that I wanted to make here was that artificial intelligence is something that is around us. We all are increasingly using it, and we see it in various small forms. And I'll talk through some of those examples today. Um, at Microsoft, when we think about artificial intelligence, we are basically thinking about how do we amplify the capabilities of humans when we talk about AI? How can AI be something that can amplify our abilities, can amplify our power to do things, and so on? Um, for a very long time, I think we have learned how to use technology. Even when we talk about GUI based interfaces like Windows, you learned how to use start and then go through the menu and so on and so forth. Um, but I think now is the time when the technology should learn about us and discover ways in which it can be helpful. um, there are various things that technology could do. It could answer things on our behalf, it could coordinate things, it could observe and anticipate our needs and so on. I want to give an example here. Let's say that you live in a very hot city and then you're driving home in a car, and you would like that when you are at home, the air conditioning is on and it's kind of already cool when you reach home. Now let's say if this has to be done, what are the kind of things that we would need? We would need something that would coordinate between the car and um, the IoT device controlling the cooling in the house. We would need to know when would you reach the house. Let's say 10 minutes before you reach the house, the air conditioning could go on and so forth. The classic case of various things existing today, they are obviously like IoT devices that talk to each other. There is kind of like maps which tell you how far you are from a destination and so on. But bringing all of them together in a sense kind of helps create a scenario which is very intelligent and can be of benefit to someone. So those are the kind of things that we are talking about when we talk about AI, right? We don't necessarily only talk about um, us driving the kind of the need, but also like the technology kind of coordinating, observing, and I think most importantly, kind of anticipating what our needs are and so on. So I want to talk a bit about like what really brought this kind of massive change in the field of AI and why it kind of became popular. AI is not really a new term. Like at least in 1960s and late 1950s, people were discussing about the concept of artificial intelligence, and it kind of like for a very long period was something which was very cool, but didn't made much promise. So like I think the three important things that have happened in the last 4 or 5 years, which have again brought AI to the forefront in some sense. First of all, is the compute power. I feel like we have such massive computing capabilities available today, and they're rapidly growing. That it is very easy for us to do very large computations. Just to give you a sense, right? The the power that the machine that took or the craft that took the first man to moon had less power than the one that we have in our cell phones today. So that is the kind of like the amount of computing that has increased in some sense. Massively. Like I mean, I think it's some it would have been impossible to think about. Like I remember that when I was a kid, the hard disk of my machine used to be like 1 GB, and now like you have RAM which is 1 GB, so there's a massive transformation in some sense. um, Same is true for data. Just to give some context, last year, like in 2018, sorry, we anticipate that the world would produce around 50 to 20 zettabytes of data. A zettabyte is like a trillion of a GB. So that is the kind of massive data that we are producing these days. With data comes like a lot of interesting things, like you are able to kind of understand um, various kind of insights or patterns from the data, which is very difficult if you don't have enough data. On top of this, of course, there are very powerful algorithms that have been developed. Um, we all know about deep learning and reinforcement learning and those kind of powerful algorithms, uh, but which really rely on the big compute and ability to churn massive data and kind of derive patterns out of them. I think those are the three things together which have led to AI innovation in some sense. So I just want to give you a couple of examples of the kind of breakthrough that we have seen. ResNet is a very deep neural network. It has 152 layers, and the primary reason of ResNet is to identify objects. So in this image, ResNet is able to identify that this is a spider, which is not very easy to identify if you really look at it even from our own eyes, like as a human. It does have some features. Maybe it might look like a spider, but you never know. So that is the kind of like breakthrough that we are talking about. The capabilities of which like in vision now we are able to basically be at par with what a human capability is to identify objects. Same is true for some other things like speech in this case. About a couple of years back, Microsoft Switchboard had a speech error rate of 5.8%, whereas the typical human error rate is 5.9%. So the technology was able to beat the human capabilities in some sense. Earlier this year, same was true for machine translation. So in machine translation, the algorithms were able to beat the quality of human translations and so on. But I think the key part of like the accessibility to AI and kind of like AI becoming available to everyone is to ensure that these algorithms, these very smart and very intensive algorithms, are not just restricted to some companies or um, some resource intensive labs or so on, but how can AI become available to everyone in the room and to everyone who kind of wants to use it is the key point. um, there are a lot of cognitive services now available in different areas. For example, in the area of vision, you have different APIs available, like face detection APIs, emotion understanding APIs, content moderation APIs. Similarly, in the field of text analytics or language, you have spell checker, translation, and so on. In speech, you have speech recognition. Um, you also have even like speech output APIs. You have different search APIs, of course, and then other things like knowledge or recommendation and those kind of things. Many of these APIs are powered by some of the deep algorithms, but then made available as APIs for anyone who wants to use it. Most companies have cognitive services like Google, Facebook, as well as Microsoft, and many of these services are available for a free trial, and then based on usage, you pay. So not only like are these services available, many of these can be customized for your need. They don't start from a massive amount of problem, like a problem space. You start with a API which is already available, and then you customize it with little bit of data that you might have had for your own use case and kind of use it. Um, if you go to if you search for cognitive Microsoft cognitive services, you would be able to find many of these APIs, and you can start playing around with it. The reason I bring this up is because I feel that many of the intelligent solutions that you may want to build um, are solving some or need some of these APIs which may already be existing. It's always a massive problem to kind of like build something from scratch, but then using intelligent solutions on top of these APIs is something that is pretty straightforward and something that could be really useful. Let me show you this video that is of Stack Overflow chatbot. So Stack Overflow basically build this chatbot for their users, and uh, it was completely built using some of the APIs from Microsoft.
Puneet,
Yeah.
so the sound is not available for the video. So if it would be better if you explain a bit or something.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so anyways, I think I can talk you through. So I think in this video, basically, Stack Overflow used some of the existing APIs to create a bot which could answer questions right in the like. For example, we all have questions like, how do I do this in Python? How do I declare variables in XYZ language and so on? So those kind of things basically can be kind of like answered using APIs, which are the ones that I already talked about, the cognitive services APIs. So there's a bit of a plumbing that needs to be done to kind of use the right APIs, but then there was no intelligence that Stack Overflow needed to build to kind of like create the chatbot. So the idea of showing this video was to kind of showcase that using many of these APIs which are available, um, you could build intelligent systems and not need to kind of uh, dive into each of the component yourself. So I think that is a huge advantage when we think about like being able to build solutions, and that is how like building on top of each other, you could kind of like build a lot of interesting things. So the next, I want to show you one more example, which is what we call Q&A Maker. So Q&A Maker is an interesting one. So like a lot of the web pages that we have today on internet have like some sort of question answer page, right? Any restaurant website would have it. In this case, on the left, I'm showing an example of Mumbai Airport having like a passengers FAQ page. Um, so, like so we did some bit of a study and in the restaurant domain, and one of the biggest asks that the users had was that they don't know like where is the information in the web page around when will the restaurant open, what are the different items on the menu, is it closed on Sunday, does it open for dinner or does it open for lunch, and so on and so forth. The big problem is that many of these websites are kind of like created over a period of time, they're not very well maintained, and it kind of like becomes hard to navigate through the FAQ page because it's somewhere hidden inside. So what Q&A Maker does is that it takes like question answers and kind of convert that into a bot. Um, so you just feed in the web page, which would contain the question answer, and the output is a bot which would answer different questions. So in this case, like where is pharmacy located is a question that this could answer based on the FAQ that it kind of like mined. Again, Q&A Maker is available as a cognitive API, and I really find it useful to create like chatbots with very ease and kind of like not worry about how to understand the different questions and what answer to give and so on. So that's really useful. Another powerful API. I want to talk a bit about Codana as well. So Codana is a personal assistant from Microsoft, and the volume of the queries or the kind of interactions that Codana has is pretty big. And I have a video, but I think this will not work. So in this case, like the user is asking different kind of questions throughout the day, um, and it's basically a showcase of how different kind of things could be needed. The user said something like, "Remind me to book, pick up a bottle of wine when I'm at a particular location." So in this case, you can see that there are a lot of things that have happened. Right, first you understand that there's a reminder that you need to set. Uh, the reminder is to pick up a bottle of wine, and then it has to be at a particular location when particular location and so on and so forth. So there are really a lot of like intelligent things that personal assistants do, um, and and it's not that these things are kind of like impossible, but they're built over a period of time and need like very dedicated and small steps to kind of like make progress. Is my point. Um, like let's walk through some of these examples, right? Like weather, for example, right? um, you could ask questions like should i should I take umbrella today? Now there are multiple things that happens when you ask that question. First of all, like somebody has to understand that this is a weather intent. You are wanting to seek the information about what is the weather like. So let's say it's sunny, then you recognize that okay, there's no need to take umbrella. But then how do you answer back? What kind of language would you use to answer back? So you say something like, no, it's sunny, you don't need an umbrella, or something like that. So there are multiple layers that happens in a digital assistant, understanding the user intent, fetching the right information, deciding what language to use to respond, and then actually speaking it out. So all of these things are available as APIs in cognitive services. The understanding of user intent can be done via an API called Luis. Um, First of all, speech recognition. So assuming that the user is speaking, so speech recognition, you could use an API to recognize speech. Then you do intent understanding using something called Lewis. Then you will fetch the content. So you could use different APIs, which the different weather APIs are available, weather channel, weather.com, and so on. You will create a response, and then you speak out. And to speak out again, you need like a speech, a very human-like speech is uh, kind of API. Again, use that API. Same is true for tracking flights packages, answering different facts for which you will need knowledge. Um, Reminder, again, you need like a very deep understanding of the intent and so on. So just like a very simple solution or a very simple kind of like an algorithm which we may use very regularly like a digital assistant is actually like a really a full-fledged AI product. It has like so many different dimensions of kind of like facets that need very intelligent technology. And I think to build something like this would take years and years if there are not enough APIs available, which then you can use and create things. I also want to talk a bit about Roo. Roo is one of the chatbot that we developed here in India. This is something I personally work on. It was launched in February of 2017. The idea of launching Roo was to that anyone who wants to chat about anything should be able to chat. There were about so we have had about like 150 million conversations to date and about more than 150,000 followers. Um, what was interesting was that how do you hold conversations, right? I mean, like when people kind of like start talking about anything under the sun, how do you do that conversation? But we have had over 10 plus hours of engaging sessions with users, um, and it's available on different platforms. I think when we first started building this product, to me it seemed like almost impossible that how would we create something which is um, able to talk about anything under the sun. But like, I mean, I think today the technology has made it possible to create something like that. I want to talk a bit about that. Um, First of all, like, I think what are the principles that the product would stand on was the question that we kind of came up with these five principles that she should be witty, she should be engaging, she need to be considerate. So like if the user is upset, she needs to understand that. She needs to stand for herself because there's a lot of online abuse that chatbots have to kind of bear. But she still needs to be like Indian at heart. Here's some examples of things like if you ask her, do you like cricket? She would say something like, yeah, I just love it. Similarly, if you ask something like, you are funny, you say, okay, I know that, thank you. But if you kind of like start abusing and say you are an idiot, then she would like stand up and kind of hit back. Oh, finally, we have something in common. I was worried for a minute, and so on. So, how did you kind of did these kind of various conversations with users, right? So I want to talk a bit about that as well. So what we did was that we took like massive amounts of Q&A pairs from internet, of the order of like 15 million pairs of Q&A that we took. So we took conversations from Twitter, we took conversations from Reddit, we from Quora, and from all other possible Q&A sites that we could find. We took conversations. Then for each user input, what we try to do is that we take like the user input and we try to match what is the closest question that the user, uh, which the user has just asked from our corpus of all these QA pairs that we have taken, and then give out the response of that question, which is the most closely matched. So this seems like a very trivial thing, but like one thing to kind of note here is that anytime you create a product which is working with really big and massive amounts of data, you have to be very careful about filtering and cleaning up the data. So we did a very intensive cleaning process of these big corpus that we had. So we have to clean for things like offensive. We have to clean for things which make it sound like not Indian. We have to clean for things which would be impossible for a bot to do. For example, like if she says something like, "Okay, I will email you in a bit," or things like that. So we did this massive amount of cleaning and came up with this thing which had a big QA pairs, and then we used deep learning to match the user input to the closest input, and then kind of like um, output the response, which is the most appropriate. Um, the next level of issue is to understand the context. So users are saying something in a context, and then you need to kind of understand that what that context is. So there's a research paper that we have, which I can offline share after uh, this chat or this session, and which you can go through. But the key idea is that you want to also understand the context when you're answering the questions using this very big corpus. So that is another challenge. One more problem that often kind of like comes up is to be able to handle abusive language. So, for example, a lot of people kind of like say offensive things or kind of like abuse the bot. So we had to build like a layer which kind of can handle abusive content. Um, so we built this layer which would be able to detect whether the user input is offensive or not, and kind of like handle it differently. And we also had to kind of like write some responses for that kind of thing. So if a user is regularly abusive, then you basically kind of like shut the user down and say that, okay, I don't want to talk to you, and then not don't respond and so on. This is also like teaching the user what kind of a behavior is good for the bot. Let me talk a bit about like the artistic side of you also a bit. This is a very interesting project that we're working on right now. That can AI learn how to paint? So given this image, could it kind of learn how to color this up? So what we did was that we looked at thousands of images which we mined from internet, and then we used a deep learning model called GAN, Generative Adversarial Network, and in particular case we used something called Pix to Pix, PIX number two PIX, Pix to Pix, a model that kind of learns how to generate from black images to these colorful images. So that is another thing that we did, which was very interesting. And I want to show some use cases of how we kind of use this. So you could try it out today if you go to facebook.com/do and just type in "Do you paint?" You could basically you will get some kind of like options, and you can select one and kind of see how this will work. So the idea of doing this thing was to see that how AI could kind of start impacting things which are not just like some hi-fi, like tech things, but also some things around us in physical world. So we took this technique, like we took the elephant painting that kind of she created, and used a very popular weaving technique called ikat to kind of weave it in real world. Um, The reason why we did this was to kind of like twofold, right? One, kind of like expand the ability of AI into a completely new field, which is like weaving. And two, like we wanted to experiment and see that how does like AI hold up in terms of art or creativity. Um, so I don't know if you guys have heard, but recently there was painting that AI created, and it was sold at Christie's for $400,000. Um, so I think using AI for art is kind of like an interesting area, something that is having very heated debate at this moment, in the sense that whether AI is something that would kind of like aid artists, or is it something which is at odds with humanity? It's some an interesting question to kind of think about, that the art, is it kind of like very human like, or is it something that could be done using machines? So a lot of there's some other things also that we tried, like for example designing different patterns using AI, and then also designing jewelry using AI. So these are again few things that were very interesting to try and see that. So I'll talk a bit about jewelry because it's such an interesting thing. So, so many of you must be aware of dynamic programming. So in this case, what we did was that we used dynamic programming to fill the a certain space with the stones, but then use a machine learning model which was trained using different jewelry principles to kind of prune those designs which are not good. The reason why I'm showing you these examples is to kind of like showcase, or kind of like m- encourage you to think about things which are not necessarily only about very standard AI problems that we see. I think the coolest innovation, the most interesting startup in the field of AI would happen perhaps in areas that we never thought of. And I think these are some of the examples of things which are very different and very interesting. Um, so I think, like Alan Kay once said, that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And definitely, there's a big, big invisible revolution that is coming. There are things that we are getting more and more dependent on that we don't realize, use AI and so on. And I think the big question that I always ask ourselves, we should, is that how will we participate in this revolution? What kind of things that we do? I think you're already kind of enrolled on Upgrad, and kind of like enhancing your skills in this domain, which is great. But I think nothing beats like really solving some hard real world problems. Um, and with that context, we launched the Microsoft AI Challenge this year. The idea of launching the challenge was that we kind of release some real world data set, some real world problem, and throw this challenge for people to try it out. And how does it feel to kind of like work on a real world problem? Um, so you could go to this website, akka.ms/AI Challenge 18, and kind of register yourself. We're offering cash prizes of 15 lakh rupees, and you have to register before 15th of November. I want to talk a bit about the problem statement as well. The problem statement is in the domain of machine reading. So the machine reading is a field of artificial intelligence, and what machine reading does is that every time you answer a question, you ask a question, it tries to answer with an appropriate response picked from the web results. So you don't see the 10 web results anymore. You basically see an answer to your question. The area of machine reading is definitely something which is kind of like an interesting field, and something that will grow over a period of time for sure. Because as the kind of ambient devices increase, you have a speaker in your house, or you have a wall which you can talk to, or something like that. You don't really kind of like always have the ability or kind of opportunity to read or explore the web links. What you need is an answer. So if you ask something like what is cricket ball made of, you kind of just want to understand the answer, that's made of cork or it's made of something, and not really have an opportunity to go through and explore different web links. um, It's a very hard problem statement indeed, like a kind of like to kind of solve it end to end. But recently, I'm very glad to tell that the machines were able to actually um, make equal kind of like with equal precision were able to fetch answer as were the humans. So a lot of progress has happened in this field. It's an interesting challenge. It's a real problem. So we release some real data for this, and I really encourage you to try out this. And um, even if you don't win, you get to work on a real world problem statement, and we are there to help and support. So again, like coming back to the from where I started, right? I mean, I genuinely feel that AI in our society has to play a role of amplifying human ingenuity. It has to amplify our abilities, our capacity, and so on. When I think about like what are the next gen products that will come out, I feel that those which kind of would really help us take take us forward in terms of ability to do things are the ones that are likely to be successful. So when you think about the next AI solution, the next AI product, um, do keep this in mind and think what this product will solve. What is the human need that this product will solve? How will it make us better than what we are today, and so on. You don't need to restrict yourself to the traditional AI products. Think about different things. Think about agriculture. Think about healthcare. Um, think about day-to-day life and think what are the things that impact everyone. How does it impact the guy in the village, and the guy in the city, and so on, everywhere, right? So that is my message today. I want to show you this video. I think the audio will not be available, but I think what this video kind of shows is that um, these are the people who kind of like living their daily lives. They are the kind of scenarios which happen every day, um, whether it be in healthcare, uh, whether it be in education, or agriculture. In this case, like you see a boy which is kind of like class, a farmer is kind of doing farming. Um, the idea again is that how can AI kind of help? Can you kind of like have analytics done on top of student engagement, on top of different machines that can really help you get better at what you do in your day-to-day life, communicate with people using AI. Translation is a great example of that. The speech is a great example of that. And so on. So I think I just move on if the video is not visible. Like in this case, you can see that this guy learned how to communicate using some of the text. They communicate with people who I speak in a sign language, um, and so on. I think that's all that I had for today. I will take on questions now, and uh, so let me just give me a minute. I will go back to yeah. So I'll take questions now. Um, can you guys still hear me?
Yes, yes, yeah. Puneet, are you audible? Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Puneet.
Okay, cool. So I'll take questions now. So first question is from Indanil. There's a short answer I have. We can only make AI as good as its a P complex, right? Um, I'm not sure what the question is. If you could type it again, I would try to answer it. Anwar is talking about how are you able to make conversations, how are you able to make conversations on social networking websites. um, so I think like basically you do some PI removal and you kind of like make these conversations anonymous, and then you could use them. So that is the answer. Mm, the data set available from Microsoft for anyone to utilize. Yes, anyone can use the data set that we release. In fact, we strongly believe that data is kind of like a big bottleneck when it comes to the AI research, because I think only few companies have these massive amounts of data available. So we are trying very hard to kind of like release data sets whenever possible. We recently released about hundreds of hours worth of speech data, which can be used to build speech recognition models. We also released a conversation data set, which has different conversations annotated with emotions like angry, sad, and so on. Uh, in this challenge that I talked about, the Microsoft AI challenge, we are releasing a data set which is real world queries and real world passages along with it. So yeah, I mean, the short answer is that the yes, the data is available for everyone to use, and in fact, I strongly encourage you to use that data. So I think there are a few more questions which seem to be part of some conversation actually. Um, to compare the near possible match, the accuracy what we see today is the cutoff point of the available resource. I think there's some comment. How different are the approaches developing goal oriented like game versus abstract AI like chatbots? I think that's an interesting question. I think like even in chatbots, you can think about two different types of chatbots. Right, one are goal-oriented chatbots, and then there are those which kind of like can talk about anything under the sun. And I think both of them have to be developed and created in a very very different way, because the goal-oriented ones need to understand the entities that involved and the queries involved, um, and also like the kind of what is the state and how do you go from one state to the another state and so on. Whereas in an open-ended chatbot, you really need to understand what is the crux of the conversation that is going on and kind of like answer that. Um, in terms of doing AI for games and those kind of things, typically like reinforcement learning, which kind of works on reward-based mechanisms, work really well because you kind of want to train the system that infinite amount of possible options that you have at most of the period of time, and what you want to make the machine learn is that how could you kind of like how do you maximize the reward. And I think that is the reinforcement learning approaches work really well when you think about like some of the goal oriented uh, things like games and so on. um, is Amazon Alexa, Google Home is the same algorithm as chatbot? How are these divided build and the accuracy levels? um, I think if you think about most, so I think Kodan is a good kind of like an example that I talked about, very similar to Google Home and Alexa. So I think if you think about, there are three or four steps involved in this, right? So first of all is the ability to recognize the speech and being able to recognize it in a fairly accurate manner, because there is no UI when you talk about to Alexa and so on. And not only that, you are always not sitting close to the device. So you are many a times very far from the device and you're kind of like talking. So there are a lot of these far field models that need to be developed when we talk about like different speaker devices. So that's one, like ability to kind of recognize voice. The other then is to be able to understand what is the intent, right? So whether I'm asking you to play music, or whether I'm kind of like asking for weather, or whether I'm asking you what is a joke, and so on and so forth, right? So understanding that intent is then the layer. So in that way, chatbots or different things are kind of like similar to each other, that you need an intent layer understanding. In that way, even search engines are kind of similar to this, that you need to understand what are the intents. Then comes the action part, like what action would you take to kind of like um, what action would you take to kind of satisfy the user intent? Let's say if I ask for what is the weather, then I want to respond with the data from the weather answer. If I ask to like play music, then I want to trigger an IoT device or something to play music. So I think the actions could be varied. There are various types of actions that could be taken, and that would be the next thing. Then comes like how would you respond? Like what language would you use to respond? And if you are actually speaking out, then the voice that you would use to speak out. So um, so that's what I think the Alexa Home and um, the kind of Google Home and Amazon Alexa kind of work on very similar lines. Um, okay. Are the conversations just fun talk or something also possible? And if you want a quick conversation, especially with technical topic. So I think this question is that can chatbots or conversational agents kind of like also have a very specific technical topic discussion? I think it's possible. Of course, the knowledge needs to be encoded. Right now, for example, we're trying to build a chatbot which can answer different movie-related conversations. So that is what we are working on. It is definitely possible, but you need to kind of like build something which is very specific around that. And then any specific type of data that can't be used. Learning AI tools, which is learning AI tools versus learning algorithms, which will be more effective to learn. So I think, like, I mean, I will talk about my case, and I have worked at Microsoft for about 10 years now, and I was actually not like, I was never trained in AI. I kind of learned everything on the job, and I think what helped me, I think the first step would be to kind of like learn the AI tools, in my opinion. You learn different tools, you like kind of get a hang of different APIs and kind of like how to use them, and what are the pros and cons of these, and in what situation do they behave in what manner, and then slowly try to understand the algorithms behind them. I think not understanding algorithms could lead to a lot of like issues in the long run, because you don't always understand then how the system is behaving. So in the long run, you do need to understand algorithms. Um, but but if you are not an academician and you are somebody in industry, then I think you're better off starting with the tools, in my opinion, and then go to learning algorithms. Because learning algorithms might be a very time consuming and very involved process. It also needs like deep understanding of machine learning, deep understanding of mathematics at times, and so on. So that would be my answer. Any specific type of data that can't be used? I mean, obviously it depends. There are a lot of like laws which prevent certain kind of things, and so on. So yes, there is data which can't be used, but I don't think I can quantify what the data is. I think AI can be used to enable Indic language computing coupled with the Cortana kind skills, which can talk to non-English in their own dialect. Any progress on it? Or which tool would you recommend? Is Scrappy? Are there better tools available? So to scrape web question, I'm not aware of Scrappy. In Microsoft, we use some internal tools, so I couldn't answer that question properly. But I think, yeah, to your question about like using Indic language on top of these kind of English things. Yes, I mean definitely this is a very interesting area of research now. Um, to reach like billion Indians, the algorithm need to be able to understand local languages. That is definitely a very interesting and important area of research, and there is a lot of work happening both in text translation as well as in speech translation. Um, there is a lot of progress that have been made that two people can talk to each other in their own language, and the intermittent system would do translation at the runtime and so on. So that is definitely possible. There is work happening in this direction, and I believe that soon it is something that will be available in production for other people to use. Um, what is the scoring criteria of Microsoft AI challenge? So let me talk a bit about the problem statement and then can answer what is the scoring criteria of Microsoft AI challenge. Um, the problem statement is given a query and you're given 10 passages. One of the passages contain the answer to the query and the other are inaccurate. So you basically like the out of X number of queries that is available in a set, how many correct passages can you identify? So that is kind of like the problem statement, and the more passages you are going to be able to identify, the better would be the algorithm, and you will be scored higher. It's a completely online contest, so we would be using a platform called Coda Lab, and anyone could kind of like make a submission and check the results runtime, and it would be completely online. So that is how it would be ranked. Um, What is the status of India's example? Could be legal advice or medical or financial insurance. So yeah, definitely like there's a lot of like India specific work happening in our teams. A lot of India specific translation models, speech recognition models happening. So yeah, definitely a lot of India specific work is happening. Um, is Microsoft doing anything specific in healthcare domain? Yes, definitely. Recently, we worked with Apollo hospitals to kind of detect the heart risk. So a lot of people come for health checkups, right? There are symptoms in your health reports which indicate that you're likely to have a heart attack. Uh, but that kind of complex analysis, humans and like doctors are not able to do just based on reading the reports. So it is possible to kind of understand that what are you risk at for heart attack and so on. So yeah, those kind of things. We're doing a lot of work in the eye care domain. So it is it's possible in many cases in childhood to kind of detect that the kid might lose vision in future and kind of like intervene and save. So those are the kind of few things. Um, what is the business model of Rue? How is the revenue stream? So I think like I mean eventually the point is that if you could kind of build an AI which is human like and kind of is able to talk like human and behave like humans, then that's a massive research problem to solve. Um, I think it's a small step. We're nowhere near that, and there's a big amount of research that still needs to be done. So I think like we're not worried about revenue at this point, and kind of like think that how can we do this research? How can we solve this really hard problem? So that's that. Um, can you sorry, how AI plus blockchain is going to change the world? So I think like I think my personal belief, I think kind of blockchain is kind of overhyped at this point, and there are a lot of like several people who have like a lot of doubt about what is blockchain and how exactly is it different from the traditional world. So I think talk about AI definitely like I think AI is going to be something that you will see very frequently used in many more products. But I'm not really sure about blockchain as such. Can you describe your AI journey? So I kind of started. I graduated out of IIT Delhi in 2008, and I joined Microsoft then. And I've always worked in the field of Bing and search engines and Cortana, conversational agents, and so on. So I never had like any formal education in AI. I kind of like learned mostly on the job. I think the most important thing when you think about AI and your ability to kind of work in AI is to be able to look at large amounts of data and kind of drive patterns out of it. Like if you could start seeing like correlations and those kind of things in your head when you're looking at data, then likely that you will be able to create algorithms that will be able to extract useful information from those things. So I think being able to analytically analyze data is one of the key skills that I think um, is needed. Coming to Ru, like I read a lot. Like I mean, I think there's great amount of work that always keeps happening in the world, and reading a lot definitely helps. Reading latest research kind of helps, and that is how we kind of like build through kind of like building on the shoulder of the giants and not necessarily like building everything from scratch. Um, do you think AI can replace human race in future? I think that's a kind of like tricky one. I don't think that AI will ever replace humans, and I think our goal with AI should be to kind of enhance the human capabilities, and that is how I think about it. What do you mean by AI tool? Can you give some examples? So with AI tools, I mean a lot of these cognitive APIs that are available. You would find, like for example, in Python, you will find like a lot of different APIs. In fact, a lot of libraries to do some really cool things, like clustering and so on, which are the kind of AI tools that I mean. But I think in I think one of the best things would be my best suggestion would be to kind of look at Microsoft Cognitive Services and look through the APIs and see that which of these APIs are useful for you in the use case that you are working on. I believe that most of the things there are APIs available, and you need to kind of like understand what API does what and kind of use that. Um, Other than that, there are also like various ML studios available. Like Azure ML Studio is one of the such toolkit where you don't need to necessarily kind of work on the algorithm itself, but you need to work on understanding the data set and so on. Um, what are the tools and options available for validate such AI application? Real world system, how is it done in real world AI system? So in real world AI systems, typically like you will be measuring some user behavior. For example, like let's say that you are a search engine, somebody searches for a query, and some results show up and they click on the first link, but then very quickly go back and look at the second link. Then you know that the first link was not useful. So those kind of user behaviors are something that you will look at. What are the AI tools and any free source links, please? So, I would encourage you to search for Microsoft Cognitive Services. You will see like a lot of services available which are free for use for trial versions, and then if you're using it in massive amount, then you pay as you go, kind of thing. Does Kaizala incorporate AI? Yes, Kaizala is an intelligent solution. It does include some AI capabilities. Um, does MS have MSDN forum specific to AI toolset? I am not sure. I can get back to you on that. Um, does Bing enable Indic language to return highly customized results for India? Can it be voice enabled? Very few in India can. It's a good suggestions. We are working on it. We don't have it out there in production right now, but it is something that we're working on. We want AI to behave like human, but we need something to limit it to, so that we doesn't create its own language or just a fear of unknown. I mean, again, I think that AI would do what we will teach it to do. It's not magic. Eventually, it's based on data and the kind of inferences. So I think like I do believe that if AI was to kind of like be an integral part of our life, it better behave more like humans, because that is how it would be something that we could live with. Otherwise, it's very difficult, I think. Um, why should we use Agile over? So I think I don't have an answer to that. Why you should use A over B? I think you should try it for yourself with the ease of use, the pricing model, and there are a lot of other things that kind of like uh, have like an answer like there. Um, I'm thinking of doing myself personally to one area domain apart from the grad program. What are the basic and key things I need to keep in mind? Industry levels you need to understand, right? Uh, on AI are challenged because of data format, what are your thoughts on industry? I think data in general is a problem. I feel like the lack of data is a problem. Like for example, search engine logs. Like only we or Google would have search engine logs. So those are the kind of things which are problematic. Um, I think if you are going in a specific domain, then try to figure out what is the problem that you will try to solve, and that is something that would really help. With that, we've come to a close. Thank you so much for spending time, and I hope this session was useful. You could do share feedback with me, and thank you, Pranav, for hosting the session. It was really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Amazing insight into. Thank you all for viewing in so late in the evening, and hope you found the session informative. Take care. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.